Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nancy Drew. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously picking up where last week's episode left off with the claw getting robbed, I immediately was thinking like, oh, it's got to be Steven. To be fair, in retrospect, it's like it makes sense it wasn't Steven because his main thing there was to steal from Bess. It was to basically rob Bess of her family, to basically blow up her life, destroy her life like she kind of did his, and at least from his perspective. So that should have made sense. Plus, why would he? I thought that's what's just he knows she works at the claw and everything, so I figured he probably just broke in there just to steal everything in there. But it's like, why would you go for the shroud? It just looks like a bloody cloth. I don't know. But now in retrospect, it's like everyone's gathered together because it's like, okay, so who would have done that? The only person who knows about the shrouds, because some of it was just kind of like meticulously, robbed, like the lock was picked. Everything else was just bashed open. So whoever it was is a good experienced thief, but also got impatient. That's why I was thinking it was Steven, but it's like, nope. Only person who knew about is us. And then they'll turn to Ace. It's like, did you tell Amanda about it? He's like, it's like, and he's just so like, you see Ace, because like Ace is usually very stoic to a certain extent, so you see him so smiling, so in love, because it's like he's like, yeah, I'm like, Amanda, it's like he's like, I'm a flower in bloom or something like that, which I love Georgia being like, Ace, I'm so happy for you, but I'm gonna die now because of you. You're in love and I'm happy for you, but now I'm gonna die because of it. So it's like, all right, so they end up tracking down Gil. Turns out he is the one responsible for this and it's actually a sad reason why. It also seems like he kept her in the dark because the moment Amanda comes, she's like, oh, hey, Ace. And it's like, oh, hi, Amanda. And it's like, they're like so cute together. It's like, oh, yeah, I got to work on this thing. And it's like, oh, I can help. And Gil's like, what? No, she doesn't need her. She's like, no, I love it. And they walk off together. And he's like, what? I guess he's a protective brother. So probably like, wait, what? Because I'm sure initially if Amanda knew what he was like up to necessarily, she would have stopped him. To a certain extent, maybe, because for her, it's a thing of it would involve hurting George, who is one of Nancy's friends, because she owes Nancy and everyone for what they did for her and Gil. But it turns out the reason why Gil took the shroud is because he knows what it can do. It's like he has no plans of selling it. It's because his mom was murdered 14 years ago by a dude named Eddie, and Eddie's about to die, and he's never confessed to what he did. So Gil, hoping to get answers, is the moment Eddie dies, Gil plans to bring him back with the shroud. But they're like, you know what will happen if you do that, right? And then Nick gets super pissed because it's like he knows exactly what it means because obviously like Amanda and Ace had been talking about it, which he was like, oh, Amanda would never break that confidence. She, what they're having is special, and he doesn't want to. And she would never compromise that breach of trust between them or whatever. I just thought that was kind of cute. But, yeah, it is kind of sad and messed up that, like, Gil knows exactly what's going to happen, that if he uses that shroud, it's going to kill George. But for him, he's so desperate for answers, which Nancy's like, all right, you trust me, right? And she's like, no, like, why would you ask that? And also, yes, I do. What are you going to do? I will help you solve your mom's case if you give us the shroud back, And it's like, obviously Nick's like, no, we're not going to negotiate, but it's like, this is the only, because they have no idea where he's hiding the shroud, and if they don't stop this in time, like, they need, because even then it's like, yeah, because the whole thing was, at first they're thinking like, it can't bring your mom back, it needs to be someone that's dead within the past hour or two, but that's why he was like, I need to get the answers from Eddie. So, when it was all said and done, Nancy takes the case. Obviously, she's got until 6, and Gil's just going to go along with his plans anyway. So, obviously, she calls Carson for help, trying to extend, like, keeping him on, like, life support until then. And obviously, we dive into it a little bit. Gil talks about the fact is that their dad wasn't around, and so the only person that was in their lives, obviously, it's always been me, Amanda, and Mom. And yeah, my mom could be a little like, our mom can be mercurial at best, and like, she could be so fun and adventurous, but kind of forget to buy us shoes. And she used to take this particular trail all the time, and one day she didn't come back down, when it was time to pick them up. So the only person who, because apparently Eddie and her were having an affair, he knows, Gil knows about that. So that's why he feels like the only person that could have done it was Eddie. At the same time, like his Ace is trying to ask Amanda to do this, but for her, it's like, I'm the sibling that's 2 minutes older, yet Gil takes on a lot of responsibilities. Like when our mom disappeared and potentially died, he took and boxed up and hid a lot of her stuff just so I wouldn't have to see it, so I wouldn't be reminded of her being gone. So it's like, for her, it's like Gil can get a little dark sometimes, especially when it comes to situations regarding their mom. And I think for her, it's a situation of they've always looked after each other, which Ace is like, didn't do that in this situation, because if Gil goes through with his plan, he's going to be killing George, and that's going to be on him. So she ends up helping them find the different stash houses, or the little stashes, all around this town, which I did think it was interesting that one of them is near a police station. It's like, oh, I guess that's kind of like, it's actually, the one nearby is actually his favorite one, which I'm like, I wonder, is that going to come back into the story in any shape or form? Maybe, maybe not. I'm also surprised Tamora didn't get involved the moment like Nancy broke in to Eddie's place and got caught by his caretaker. I was like, she was like, oh, like, he doesn't have a niece and he's legally blind, so he doesn't paint. And she's like, yeah, and she just like casually walks away. I'm like, I'm surprised they didn't bring Tamora up in the story, because like, oh, Tamora would have jumped on his opportunity. Oh, you're breaking and entering again. It's like, I guess maybe the caretaker's never been down there, so it's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of like, I'm surprised that it turned into something. Granted, it could always end up turning into something later, but they didn't go through that point this episode, so I'm sure that would have already sucked. We don't know if she's still doing her community service of 500 hours. I mean, I guess since the morgue story already played out its point, there's kind of no reason to kind of go back to that. Maybe later on we'll find out, like, oh, she's still doing it, and maybe we get to those final hours or final minutes of community service, or at the very end of it. Regardless, they haven't gone back to that since the beginning of this story arc, so we'll see if they'll ever circle back to that or not. And, you know, because once again, you never 100% know the full time frame in between these episodes and everything. So I did like the interesting aspect of, like, you know, as like obviously Nancy's, you know, trying to pitlock it her way into the house, but you know, you had Gil like making the caretaker's like car like drift and like kind of drive off by itself, and he's like, I'm sorry, like, I'm patient. Like, he has low patience. That's what he was just making a joke about. He's like, come on, Drew. Wasn't that more fun than just picking an old lock? And I was like, and the way she was looking, I was like, oh, she's kind of going for the bad boy now. Like, you know, which I think is interesting, because it almost puts, it's almost like that. Once again, I make this comparison. It's very Batman and Catwoman, obviously a little inverse in this particular case, but just kind of like the whole, like, oh yeah, like, you know, oh, you're kind of the detective, I'm the criminal, so us kind of hitting it off kind of fits. But it kind of reminds me a little bit of that dynamic to a certain extent. Like I said, I've been using that as a go-to reference, because I feel like that's the pinnacle example of like that kind of like cat-mouse relationship in a very like, oh, will they, won't they type of situation. And it seems like they're setting that up with Gil and Nancy, because Nancy hasn't like been in a I think the last relationship she was in was with Owen, and obviously the way things kind of played out on that front, so I don't know. But they ultimately ended up finding a whole bunch of paintings in like Gil's place, and they're of his mom, but it's like all these kind of disturbing paintings at first, and they're like, there's some creature mind. It's like, oh, so was it something supernatural hunting her? Because I was thinking, like, because Nancy was like, there's no body in here, so she's thinking, like, he just painted these. It's like, yeah, but the fact is he painted these, Gil's like, that means he's obsessed with my mom, like, he had to have something to do with this. But they end up tracking down the paintings back to a museum, art place, and obviously it turns out the artist is known as Unknown, and they have a very unique signature. And so trying to figure out that signature, it turns out like one of the paintings they ended up buying ended up, which I love the whole thing of like, no, we didn't buy it, Nick did. And Nick's like, wait, what? I quickly glossed over that. But it turns out there's another painting underneath, and it's one of Gil and Amanda's mom, but older, like what she'd look like now about 14 years later. And it's like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Luckily, well, sadly, Eddie ended up dying, so they couldn't extend the, you know, thing of keeping him on life support. His body kind of gave out. But before Gil could get there, Nancy had already kind of got him transported to the morgue. He's already halfway there, and by the time you actually catch up with him, it'll be too late to use the shroud. And Nancy ends up revealing to Gil, your mom's actually still alive. She never died. They looked into her medical reports. It turns out that signature was their, you know, their weight when they were born. You know, both Gil and Amanda's, because they ended up finding like a lot of the stuff he had stashed away in one of his stashes ended up some of their mom's stuff he packed away, which included like a baby book or whatever. So that's what those numbers were. That's why they were their signature. It turns out their mom was sick, and basically she was scared about that. The reason why she left them because she kind of felt like she was going to potentially be a danger to them, because in her mind she kept thinking like there was some monster hunting her, so she was kind of in a delusional state. And she thought, because Amanda remembers like at a very young age her mom saying like, I'll protect you from the monster, this is the only monster you need to be scared of. So it's like, but for him it's like, why didn't mom tell me? And she's like, because she was trying to protect you. Plus, I'm the older one, so I'm the one that should be kind of protecting you in that, regard. So it is kind of sad that Gil went through all this and his mom's alive. And it's not like she abandoned him because it's like she didn't want to put too much weight on their shoulders for them to know the truth about it. She didn't want to scare them, and it's sad that things kind of turned out this way. It turns out like her and Eddie met each other through like, what was it, like some therapy group or something, I think was what Nancy was saying, and that's where they kind of hit it off. So it wasn't an affair situation. I mean, maybe it was, but it wasn't an affair. It was just Eddie gave her a place to paint, and she made Eddie promise not to say anything about it because she never wanted her truth, which is kind of sad. Like, he took on all of Gil's resentment and everyone's belief that he was a killer just because he wanted to protect her secret, because I think he felt like that was more valuable, because he knew like he didn't want to break a promise to her, knowing what she was going through. So, and I thought it was interesting, once again, things not having the necessary supernatural outcome. Once again, it's like they go full blown supernatural, and like I said, through these past couple episodes, they've kind of tailed that back. Like I said, I get eventually the supernatural stuff is going to heavily ramp up. Like, it's just you're gonna be up. There's gonna be so much supernatural stuff. We're gonna be drowning in supernatural stuff. Like, that's what I'm getting the feeling. But Gil kind of apologizes and everything. Which there's an interesting conversation between Ace and Nancy later on. It's like, oh, like, because Ace is looking into their mom, and it's like, oh, like Nancy thought about it, but it's like Gil never asked her, so she's like, it's not my mystery to solve. Because I think she understands more than anyone about a mom situation. Obviously, learning a lot about her mom, like both her biological mom as well as her adopted mom, like learning so much on both fronts, because that was a mystery she needed to solve. And it's like, who am I to take that mystery, that chance away from someone? So it's like, that has to be kind of Gil and Amanda's choice, whether they really act upon that, and it's like, Ace being like, I know who you are. I know you. So, he would have killed George, so he can't really be trusted, but I know that you two have become attached. And she's like, says the dude that's dating his twin sister, and he's like, I'm not dating his twin sister. And she's like, yeah, it says the blue pullover you're wearing. So it's like, I thought that was kind of a nice moment. And then it's like, oh, Gil's here. It's like, I don't think he's here for the chowder. If you want to, you could just sneak out the back and we get the new guy to take his order. And Nancy's like, yeah, that would probably be the smarter thing to do. And they're smiling towards each other. It's like, oh, aren't we a pair falling in love with these complicated twins, huh? But I think Nancy, like I said, Nancy can understand, just with her complicated, what she's found out about her family in many different regards. Actually, her being a Hudson, her whole dad situation, finding out that, having to find out all this on her own and not from Carson himself. Like, she understands, and I think understanding being in that dark place, like, she can understand that more so than anything, because she brought it up, because obviously, Eddie had like this death, like, convulsion, and she was like, and she knew what it was, and he was like, how did you know? She was like, when my mom was sick and dying, I looked it up because I figured it would, she wanted to know everything she could because she thought it could bring her calm or something like that. And he was like, did it work? And she was like, no. So I thought that was kind of a neat situation to kind of leave off in that regard. I love the whole situation with Bess. Obviously, Bess is kind of breaking down because she feels like she has nothing left in life now that the Marvins have kind of kicked her out. And I love the Ace phone ring at the beginning of the episode. She's like, oh, that's what it sounded like when the Marvins texted me. She even later on says, like, oh, they took me off the group chat. At first I was like, is she talking about the team because, like, oh, they don't want to bother her? But it's like, no, she was specifically referencing the Marvins. So it's just like one blow after another. But Carson found her in that state, and he decided, like, oh, I'm actually going to work from home. And he's like, oh, I got to work on this opening statement. Will you help me with it? And she's there. She's giving him a lot of notes. He's like, thanks. And she kind of finally pieces it together. This whole thing has been a trick. And it's like, yeah. He's like, it was not really a trick, just more of a nudge, trying to push her in the right direction. Because at first I was wondering, did he do this because, seeing her like that probably made him think a little bit of like, oh, I'm sure Nancy didn't. I mean, who knows? I don't think Nancy responded in the same way to her mom's death. When it's something complicated happening in your life, I think like Nancy bottled a lot of that stuff up. I don't think she necessarily, I mean, maybe she did, and maybe that's what kind of inspired him, because he just to see how brokenhearted Bess is, especially when you see Bess. Bess is usually so like a little more optimistic and so upbeat. To see her kind of like down in the dumps like that probably brings you down a little bit even more, to see like the most chipper person you'll know not so chipper. But he actually ended up talking about, you know, obviously like life has its complications, essentially, that, you know, but all, and he made a reference to like, I love the whole spider monkey speech he was giving about like spider monkeys. They don't look down. They just look towards the next vine in front of them and they grab onto it. They don't think about it. They don't look down. They don't worry about it. They just have faith that the next vine is going to be there. The next vine in your life is going to be there, Bess. You just have to wait, because she feels like she kind of doesn't have anything right now, and I thought that was just kind of a beautiful bonding moment they had in that regard, you know. And I wonder, he was like, oh, you're really good at this, so I'm wondering, is he going to get any help from her, you know, because obviously he's got Nancy working for him. Eventually, you know, will Bess be kind of an assistant that kind of helps him with certain things too or something like that? I think that'd be pretty dope, but who knows. I'm curious to see what, you know, she is going to do. Luckily, she was there to kind of help with things later on in the episode, so I think it shows that, like, obviously she's at least back in better spirits. So I'm curious, you know, what she is going to do about the Marvin thing. Like, was she going to try and make amends on that front? Is she just, you know, what is that next vying in her life? At the same time, you have the whole Nick and Odette situation, and it's just like Odette seriously doesn't like Nick, and now Nick's struggling to balance all this about, like, oh, you and Odette. He even talks about it with, well, later on when they were looking for Gil's stash, and it's like, oh, calling him an idiot for not being able to tell the difference between limestone and granite. And she finds like the tomb, like the gravestone of like her lover, the English woman she was in love with that died, Mary. And, you know, for her, it's a situation of, you know, it's like, because Nick was like, oh, what, aren't you the lucky one because you're not dead? But she's like, yeah, but my bones aren't in the ground with the love. I'm not able to spend eternity with the love of my life, you know, because her life is cut so short. And so later on, hearing Nick talk about like, well, you know, what if me and, you know, George are intimate, and like maybe there's a shift there. I don't know who I'm going to bed with. I don't know who I'm waking up with, or in between night and morning, like who's going to be there. And it's like, Odette, yeah, she's just so mean. And you have Bess agreeing and everything, and Nick being like, we're going to have to work on a schedule, and she's going to have some solitary confinement, stuff like that. Obviously, that pissed Odette off hearing that, so she decides that she's waiting to the tides to be low so there's nothing to cushion her fall, because she's planning on killing herself, which is so messed up, because it's like, I get you want to be reunited with your love, but it is super messed up. You're the one that took a ride in George's body as well. I mean, granted, that wasn't your choice. You happened to be nearby. But it is also messed up that, like, it should have come across your mind of, like, what was happened to you, what was done to you. You're going to take someone, just because your life was ended at such a young age, for you to do that to George, too, is messed up, considering it's not just Nick. They didn't bring it up. But it's also, she's got her siblings to look after. Like, you were really going to take their sister away from them? Like, that's messed up. They were also, like, her oldest younger sister was already worried that, like, wait, I'm going to lose my sister. We're going to lose her, like, because of the blood curse and everything. So that's why I was like, it is messed up that, like, it's selfish. It's like, yeah, I get you want to be reunited with your love, but it is messed up for you to, like, take George's life in the process. Like, I get it. You were pissed about Nick. Oh, you're going to try and confine me. It's understandable. You're in his girlfriend's body, and it's like, you're not playing by the rules. Anytime you come out, you're kind of a dick and a douche. A little bit. Understandably so, from a different time, but also, like, you know, you have no regards for these people, because in your mind, they have no regards for you. They don't care about your feelings or get to know you. It's just like, oh, I mean, you know, you are possessing the body of someone they care about. And that was obviously a conversation George was having with Nick early in the episode. The only way either one of them is going to have peace is if they come to terms with it. That was the whole thing Nancy was bringing up last episode, that, like, obviously, home dude who got the Shroud prior went crazy and couldn't, you know, didn't come to terms with the potential two other souls living inside of him. So it's like, she needs to come to terms with it, or George is going to drive herself insane, because the only way Odette is leaving is if he died. Because it's like, I've looked up every form of exorcism and nothing works. It's like, she's like, this is something I've got to live with. The question is this something you can commit to as well? Because this is kind of, at this point in time, I'm a package deal. So you want me, you get Odette too. So sadly. So, but Bess, using the opening statements stuff that it's like, if it will please the court, and even if it doesn't, it's like, and referencing being like a spider monkey, next vine, you just have to have a little faith, and obviously Nick is like, if you do this, then I will follow you over that cliff, because I can't lose George. And it's like, fine, we'll do whatever we can to help you find out what happened to your love and everything. We'll find a way around this. We'll make this work somehow. And just like, please don't do this. And it's like, if it pleases the court, and even if it doesn't, So luckily things kind of worked out on that front as well. But interesting developments. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what this new dynamic is like. All right, we got to accept Odette, but it is the thing of probably we do need to set some ground rules. You're not going to be confined, but at least let's work around this, in some shape or form. I guess they are going to do some investigating into what happened to Odette's love, Mary. What her life was like and stuff like that. And because also another thing Nick was saying is like, even if you do this, there's no guarantee you'll be able to meet up with your love, because you don't know if you two will necessarily be reunited in that regard. So we'll see where things going to go on that front. But we also had the thing at the end where we had Ace and, Ace telling Amanda, well, I know where your mom is. If and when you decide that you're ready to go looking into this, the information's there. She's in, was it like New Mexico? I think it's a specific one, like El Paso, New Mexico, or something like that. So, and she's like, yeah, I'm about to do something my brother's really not going to like. I'm going to give you 3 guesses. He's like, what if I get it in 1? And she's like, oh, that's so cute. And then he gets a phone call, and she's like, oh, is that my brother? And he was like, no, it's mine. Which I don't know why I had it in my head to think his sibling was a sister. Because I know he just said like, yeah, I think I'm your brother, and that was just it. Like, I don't know why I had it stuck in my head for whatever reason, thinking he had a sister, not a brother. But regardless, I was like, okay, so we're making some... Because early in the episode, Amanda was like, do you have any siblings? He was like, that's a question. So we're potentially diving deeper down that route, kind of figuring out what's what in that regard. So I'm really interested to find out where things kind of go on that front. So... I'm curious to see where all of this goes, going forward into the next episode. Sorry. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.